Hello, this is Mrs. Pickett, and today we're going to take notes over lesson 2-6. We are going to talk about literal equations today. So make sure you have your notebook out or that you have copied or printed out this worksheet so that you can take notes on it. So I'm going to put at the top here our lesson titles. This is lesson 2-6, and we're going to talk about literal equations. So still working with equations, but now we're going to work with equations that have more than one variable, okay? And before you get nervous, this is actually easier, I think, than when you're just solving regular equations because there's not as much math involved. So I think you guys are going to like this, okay? So a literal equation is an equation with multiple variables, so more than one. So up until this point, we've only been working with one, like there would be an x, okay? So I want to show you, I'm going to start by having you solve, or we're going to solve them together, each of the equations below for x. Now the first one here, this is a simple two-step problem that we have been doing for the past 2 weeks, okay? So we should know by this point that I'm going to undo my subtraction by adding. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. Those cancel out because they're inverses. 2x equals 13 plus 5 is 18. And now we're going to undo our multiplication. So I'm going to divide. And I get that x equals 9. Okay? Simple. You guys have no problem. All right. The problem over here is a literal equation. So we have lots of variables. We are going to solve it the exact same way. All right, I am still solving for x, just like I did here. So look, in the first equation, we had a 2x. Now I have an ax. That a acts just like the 2 did. All right, so if I highlight these for you, 2 and a, they have the same properties. So the same thing I did with 2, I'm going to do with the letter a. And then also, the minus 5 here is the same as like the minus b. Okay, they work the exact same. And then the 13 would be the same as the C. So instead of having numbers, they're just letters, but we're going to solve it the exact same way. So I'm going to divide my equation. Now if I want to solve for x, the first thing that I have to do is move the minus b. So again, we're thinking, what is the opposite of subtraction? And the opposite would be to add. So I'm going to do plus b on both sides, just like I added 5, okay? Now these are going to cancel out because they're opposites, a negative and a positive. I'm going to bring down what's left. So I had ax is equal to, now here I want to add c plus b. Now c and b are different variables, so we know that we cannot combine them. So I'm just going to write it as c plus b, okay? Now, the last step, I need to get rid of a. So right now it's being multiplied. So just like I did over here with the 2, I'm going to divide by a. That's going to cancel out, and now I'm going to get my final answer here. I'm going to get that x is equal to, and then I'm going to leave it just like this, c plus b divided by a. And that would be your answer. All we're doing is moving the variables around by undoing the operations. So if it's a subtraction, we're going to add. If it's a multiplication, we're going to divide. And continue just like that, okay? So let's jump down here. So a little quick write. Identify similarities and differences between the two equations. All right, and I was talking to you about this, and I'm going to give you some ideas, but you could be thinking of, like, think in your head right now as you're listening to this. Jot some down. Similarities and difference. So we, whoops, get to the right pin here. So for both equations, okay, so this is a similar, used opposite operations or our inverse operations. So used inverse operations. So we're still undoing stuff the same way. Whoops. Can't spell. Inverse operations. Okay. Oops, I didn't even erase it all. I was trying to spell opportunity. I don't know. I'm giving you guys a great opportunity here. Operations. Okay. So that's something that they had in common. And then so they both do, like, if it's addition, we're going to subtract, so opposites. Now, something that's different is with your literal equations, they don't simplify nicely. You're going to be left with multiple variables. So the literal equation doesn't simplify. Okay, now however you want to say that. That just means, like, we couldn't add together the C and B because we don't know what they are. Okay? Now, let's look at some problems. So these are one step, just like a simple one-step equation. So I want to solve for W. So the first thing is to identify which variable we want to solve for, and that's going to stay in that place. We have to move everything else away from it. So if L is right next to W, that means that we're multiplying, so the opposite would be to divide. So I'm going to divide by my little cursive L here, and so we would get that W is equal to A divided by L. And that's it. That's how you leave your answer. It's that simple. All we are doing is undoing those properties. Let's look down here at number 3. D equals RT. So this is distance formula. Distance is equal to rate times time. We're going to solve for T. So I'm going to figure out where T is. And so in order to solve for T, I need to divide by R. And so we're going to get that T is equal to D divided by R. And that is my answer. All right? Super easy. Do not make this more complicated than it is. If we look at number 5, I want to solve for H. So now this one has 2 letters that are being multiplied. Whoops. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to divide both letters, L and W, L and W. And those will both cancel out. So I'll have H equals volume, the V, divided by LW, which is length and width. And then there is my answer. Okay? If we look at number 7, we're solving for C, so I need to add the S. C equals, we cannot combine M and S because they're different variables, so we just write it as M plus S, and then that would be my answer. Okay? Let's go to the next page here and do some multi-step problems. So, some hints that I gave you. Think backwards. So when you are solving, if we use order of operations, so parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, or subtract, you're going to think backwards. So you're going to start by undoing, like, addition, subtraction, then multiplication, division, and so on. Okay? Same thing, you still need to remember, we remove fractions by multiplying by the reciprocal. That's where you flip it. Okay, so if you forgot what a reciprocal is, that's what it is. And then the last step is to divide by whatever is next to your variable. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Whoops. So if we look at number 9, again, identify your variable. We're going to solve for H. Okay, I need to get rid of the 1/2. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2, or 2 over 1. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. That cancels out, so I have 2A is equal to BH. Now remember, we're solving for H, so now the next step, I'm going to divide by B so that I can get rid of it. That cancels, and so we would leave it as H equals 2A divided by B. You're going to leave it just like that. You're not going to get like a x equals 2 type answer because we have multiple variables. Okay? Let's look at number 11. So again, we're going to solve for M. So M's going to stay there. Everything else has to move. Now look, this one's being divided by 2. So the opposite of division is to multiply. Those two things are going to cancel out. So I have 2K is equal to MV squared. V squared is being multiplied, so now I'm going to divide by the V squared. So you keep the exponent with the variable that it goes with, okay? Make sure you remember that. Sometimes that throws people off. And then, look, we already now solved it because we're left with m equals 2k divided by v squared, and that would be your answer, all right? Let's look at 13. We're going to solve for w. So first off on this one, if I draw my line here, I'm adding this 2L, so I need to subtract 2L because I always want to undo and do the opposite. So this is going to cancel out. Over here I have P minus 2L, and that's equal to 2W, okay? Now, once I get to this point, to get W by itself, I have to divide by 2. And so I'm going to divide everything by 2. And so we get that W is equal to P minus 2L, all divided by 2. All right? Hopefully this is starting to make some sense here. So what I would like you to do is tonight, for your flip grid, I'm trying to see which one I want you to do. Let's do 15 for the flip grid, all right? So everyone's going to solve 15 for me and explain it for the flip grid. So you're going to solve for x in this one because this one has a couple steps that you need to do, okay? And then any questions you have, come into class tomorrow, and I can't wait to hear from you, and I can't wait to see your flip grids. Have a good night.